We're going to talk about the for loop. It's a pre-test loop. Unlike the previous while loops where you had to modify the counter separate from declaring and initializing your counter, this being the counter, what counts against your end condition, you do this all in the header of this for loop. It's a conditional loop and it executes as long as a particular condition exists. Any loop that repeats a specific number of times is known as a count controlled loop, and this is a count controlled loop. It must have 3 elements. So if you look at the syntax here, you'll see the 3 elements. First is the initialization. So it must initialize a counter variable to a starting value. It then must test the counter variable by comparing it to the maximum value. When the counter variable reaches its maximum value, the loop will terminate. And then we have our update, and this must update the counter variable during each iteration. That way we can eventually break out of this loop and we don't have an infinite loop. It's usually done by incrementing the variable. Count controlled loops, which I said a little bit ago, are basically a for loop. It's specifically designed to initialize, test, and update a counter variable. Sometimes you even use this counter variable in the block of code inside the for loop. You can see that we have this example right here of what a for loop would look like with everything filled in, and then to the right we have our console where it prints out all of the variables. If you have any questions about how this works, leave them in the comments below. Lastly, well, 2 things left. When should you use this? You should use a for loop instead of a while or do while loop in any situation that clearly requires initialization. If there's a false condition to stop the loop, you can use a while loop. If it requires any kind of like updating though, you'd want to use a for loop so that you could do it all in the header. Lastly, we have running total, accumulators, and sentinels. A running total is a sum of numbers that accumulates with each iteration of the loop. An accumulator is a variable used to keep the running total. So accumulator and variables work closely together because it's basically the same thing in the program. Programs that calculate the total of a series of numbers typically uses 2 elements: a loop that reads each number in the series, and then a variable that accumulates the total of the numbers that are read. Sentinels are special values that mark the end of a list of values. When a user enters a sentinel, then the loop will terminate. So that's just some information on running totals, accumulators, and sentinels, some bonus information, but the main part of this video was to understand for loops. So if you have any questions, again, let me know. If you want more C++ practice, check out that playlist below the like button. Good luck on your studies and have a great day.